Us. Hello. Hey, Daniel. Us. Rob. Good to see you. I hope everyone's going well in the COVID environment. What a terrible time. But anyway, it's harder for some than others. Victoria's in a terrible state of affairs. Us, Harry, Frederick. Good morning. It's afternoon here, as you know. Us, Marco. Good to see you. Look, today I think it's going to be really interesting because I'm going to read from my book, and the section I'm going to read, I tend to think it's very, very rarely known or even discussed, or I'd be very surprised if anyone really has spent a lot of time training on it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Us, Mike Lorden, good to see you from all the way from FLA. And Damien and Rochelle. So this section I think would be fun. And what I'm going to do is, normally I know that I do training today. Mike, glad you're here. I've got a section which I think you'll be very familiar with, but we'll talk about it in a sec. Normally I train today and do the reading on Friday, but Friday I won't be here. It's good news. I'm actually going, I've got 2 solid days meeting with Willie, my good buddy Willie, the graphic designer, who we're putting together, finalizing the book, going through everything, clarifying everything, all the photos, the illustrations, the work. So it's a really exciting time. Ben Tipper, good to see you, man. Torbjörn, thanks for coming. So today I'm going to read a section from the book on Kata, and I really hope you enjoy it, because I'm really excited by the potential that I think it's going to bring to Kyokushin on a whole. Okay, so the section is from Kata, and I'm not going to read all the way from the top of Kata. Maybe I will another time, but it'll just take too much time. But what I'm going to read is this special section, and then the follow-on section to that. So the section is called Kaisei no Gendi. Kaisei no Gendi. I'll write that in. And that's why I mentioned Mike Clark. I'm glad he's here, because Kaisei no Gendi is actually an Okinawan Goju term. We'll talk about that as we go. So I'm sure Mike Clark not only knows about it, has trained it, and is familiar with it, but he can fact check me as we go. That's why I'm glad you're here, Mike. So anyway, Kaisei no Gendi, and I subtitled the section Keys to Unlock the Mysteries of Mastery. I have a quote from Toguchi Seikichi, who is one of Miyagi Chojun's top students. The work to find hidden techniques in kata is called kaisei in Goju Ryu Karate. The guiding principle for kaisei is called kaisei no Gendi, or the theory of kaisei. These terms were created by Chojun Miyagi. One karate training term that is generally unfamiliar to students of Kyokushin is kaisei no Gendi. The term itself finds its earliest origin in China, where the same characters are found in various early martial arts writing going back to the Shaolin Temple. In Japanese, kaisei can mean to open or unlock. Gendi means a theory or a principle. I have translated the term as keys to unlock the mysteries of mastery. I have a footnote here, which is the Chinese characters that I've found in my research using the same characters. And I even put the Chinese pronunciation for you. Cai jie shou fa. You didn't know I spoke Chinese, did you, Ben Tipper? Hey, Ken, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. Got your message too. Really appreciate it, Ken. In Chinese, it may be translated as demolishing attack or the technique of destruction. In Chinese martial arts, however, the term was primarily used as a principle of teaching more than as the name of a single technique. It described the idea of revealing the deeper secret behind the art's techniques, like cracking open a seed to reveal what is inside. This use of the phrase in Chinese traditions is more in tune with the meaning as used by Miyagi and hints to possible influences of his choice of the word. Keep in mind that Miyagi Chojun spent a couple of periods studying in China. Generally speaking, kaisei is accurately interchangeable with bunkai training, although at higher levels of training, there is divergence. Bunkai can be seen as simply breaking down a kata into its constituent techniques and analyzing those techniques. Kaisei takes this a step further and analyzes, researches, and applies established principles of training to the process of bunkai. The main reason kaisei is worthy of study is found in these principles passed down from the masters of the past. Without knowing these supporting principles, bunkai training is difficult. So these principles can greatly assist bunkai training for Kyokushin karateka worldwide. And that's the main reason I wanted to include it, is because Kyokushin is, well, I'll talk about it in a sec, but Kyokushin is becoming more conscious of bunkai, but in terms of taking it a little deeper with guiding principles behind it, there are very few in Kyokushin other than Sosai's three main principles, which we have spoken about previously. Very little has been written in English about kaisei no gendi. In Kyokushin, I have seen nothing. In Japanese, there is also very little in print. Why? These principles were jealously protected, at least to the extent that my own research allows, that can be used in your own day-to-day training, especially as the role of the in-depth kata research becomes more important than ever before in Kyokushin. The aim is not to introduce yet more Japanese terminology. There is enough of that already. You can continue using the term bunkai and simply apply these guidelines to take your bunkai training to the next level. In the study and development of his karate, Goju-ryu founder Miyagi Chojun created the principle of unraveling and retying knots. In Japanese, toki tomusubito no gendi. The idea was to focus on a kata's knot points, that's K-N-O-T points, and through research and experimentation with a partner in a kind of prearranged kumite, unravel their secrets. Once understood, the student returned to the kata with more clarity. This type of two-man prearranged sparring was the tradition in China since the earliest origins of martial arts, and still provides the key method of kaisei bunkai training. It is even said by some that this kind of two-man training came before the solo kata themselves. That makes sense too when you think about it, because if you imagine going right back, with in the earliest days, you had a couple of fellas crawling out of their cave, having a stretch, looking over and go, you want to get together and work on those techniques so those buggers over the hill there who keep marauding our caves won't have a chance next time. So they get together. Well, you're not going to have one of them go, I've got this really good technique. What I do is I turn around, bend down, pick up a rock and crash their head with it. What they'll do is they'll get together as a two-man combination. And I go, how about I do this? And boom, and the other guy will go, yeah, but I'll do this. And he'll go, yeah, but if you do this, you know. And so it's obvious that two men would work better together creating the moves, and the kata would come later, because then he goes, hey, Bob, you want to get together and practice? He says, no, I got to go and hunt because I've got my wife inside and she's about to wake up after I knocked her out and I need to get some food. He goes, okay, I'll practice it myself. So, old mate over here, he picks up the rock and starts to practice himself. So what came first, chicken or the egg? Well, it was clear to me that the two-man drill came before the one-man kata. Japanese karate schools, in my experience, most engage in reverse engineering their kata. The bunkai came first. The kata was made up to practice principles. Now, Mike, are you saying that Japanese said the bunkai came first, because if you did, I'm going to have to rewrite my entire book, because in my head, the bunkai came first and the kata put it all together. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. I hope that's what you're saying. I'm in trouble. Otherwise, I'll hang up now and go and rewrite everything. Okay, so let's keep going. Before long, Miyagi simplified the phrase toki to musubi to no gendi to kaisei no gendi. And toki to and musubi to. Toki means to unlock or unravel. And the kanji for toku is the same as the kanji kai, as in bunkai, and the kai as in kaisei. So toki means to unravel. To musubito, like musubidachi. Musubidachi literally means, the binding together step. Toki to musubito no gendi to kaisei no gendi. When Miyagi's teacher, Higaon Nakanryo, returned to Okinawa after living and training in China for many years, he brought with him extensive martial arts skills and training principles. One of the training concepts he introduced to Okinawa was kaisei kumite, the two-man prearranged drilling of techniques taken from kata. It is very likely that Miyagi was influenced by this in his choice of words. Yes, good. I thought that's what you meant, Mike. I'm glad. Okay, I don't have to go back now and rewrite everything. Good on. Hey, Harry, keeping in mind Sambon Kumite techniques. Well, kind of, yes, a little bit like Sambon and Ippon Kumite, exactly. Paul Knep, Morgan, hope you're well. Speaking of which, a number of katas such as Seipai and Sushiho have Buddhist significance regarding those numbers. I ask you, since you mentioned the illustrious Shaolin Temple. Yeah, Tigray, you're right, because whether there is strong influence or whether it was just a numerological thing, like 1854, 18, 1 plus 8 is 9, 5 plus 4 is 9, 54 is half of 108, 108 is the magic Buddhist number, and 54 is also coincidentally the number of beads on a Catholic rosary. But yes, so there's magic in those numbers as well. You're right. Phew. The number 3 is there too. Yeah, 3 3s are 9. Okay, let me keep going here. Miyagi's student, Toguchi Seikichi, popularized this term outside of Japan. Toguchi's book, Okinawan Goju Ryu 2, Advanced Techniques of Shoreikan Karate, and if anyone has a spare copy you'd like to sell me, let me know, because I've been trying to get my hands on a copy for many years. Okinawa Goju Ryu 2, Advanced Techniques of Shoreikan Karate, is arguably the primary source of information in English regarding kaisei no gendi. Kata were often deliberately created with shades of secrecy. A kata would contain the essence of a school's movement philosophy so those secrets were guarded jealously. The techniques and body transitions within have layers of meaning and application. The obvious techniques on the surface hide layers of applications. I'll reword that, I think. These surface techniques, or hyomengi, so hyomengi is another Japanese word. Like I said, got to be careful here. There's a lot of new Japanese words, but they're not that important. They're just valuable if you do research, and they're valuable to understand the foundation of it all. After that, you just go and train, These surface techniques, or hyomengi, so gi means technique, as in sokugi taikyoku, which is foot technique. Hyomen means surface, are the visible techniques presented in the kata and merely suggest a circumstance or indicate what may be applied in the circumstance presented. Even a simple punch applied in different ways and to different targets brings different results. A simple way to describe the whole bunkai training process is that we are taking the hyomengi, or visible techniques, and unlocking the invisible techniques, or kaisei-gi. Teachers were very cautious about who and what they taught these innermost secrets to. Until a student had earned the trust of the teacher, these deeper keys remained hidden. The more effective applications of techniques were disguised in ways that were easy to do safe to teach as a simple exercise suitable to all, and effective enough as a fighting technique to satisfy most students. This ensured that the deeper teachings of a system were preserved for the selected few who were loyal to that system. The kata concealed a hidden code, a blueprint of its creator's fighting philosophy that needed a key to be unlocked and understood. The key that cracks the code within the kata is kaisei no gendi. Where are we? I pressed the wrong button and I'm scrolling through just about. There we go. Bunkai came first. Yeah, good. For a serious understanding of kata, the advanced student trains with a trusted partner to research and drill deeply the principles upon which a kata is built. Without this important aspect of training, there is little chance of mastering a kata. Kata have become, in many systems and dojos, nothing more than a stylized flow of techniques where the artistic impression of the performance is more important than being able to use the techniques under pressure against a non-compliant opponent. This is what Masayama referred to as dance karate. And interesting, I think that's worth keeping in mind too. Nothing more than a stylized flow of techniques where the artistic impression of the importance is more important. And when we continue a little later in this chapter, I talk about the rules of kaisei. And the first rule is, don't be fooled by that line and flow of technique. So it's really important. Emphasis on tournament fighting beginning in the 1960s meant that the level of kata mastery lagged well behind the strength of its tournament fighting. Some observers in other styles are surprised when they first hear that Kyokushin even includes kata training at all. In some dojos, this is sometimes true. Editing on the go. Even high-ranking black belts often have not taken kata training any deeper than a superficial grasp of the correct embusen, that's that line and sequence of moves, and a very superficial interpretation of the techniques. It is only as Kyokushin moved into its third and fourth generation of students that more consideration was given to high-quality kata bunkai training. This, I believe, is a reflection of one aspect of Masayama's future plan for Kyokushin, the Shin Soseiki, the new genesis he spoke of before his passing. There is no denying that for a long time, the general level of Kyokushin's kata mastery was undeveloped and superficial. This is no longer the case. True kata mastery is mastery of bunkai, and that best comes through deep research and hard work with a trustworthy training partner. Yes, that's correct. In Japanese too, it's sometimes called hidengi. I'm just going to get off my Caesar. It's killing me. Okay, yeah, hiden. Yeah, that's correct, Mike. In Japanese too, they call it hiden or okugi, the hidden back techniques. Unko Itosu's effort to make karate more widely accepted at the turn of the 20th century also drove many hidden applications of the various techniques into even deeper obscurity. This had both advantages and disadvantages, keeping the more dangerous aspects of karate away from the critical gaze of an unforgiving general population, served to increase karate's popularity, but considerably weakened the art's basic effectiveness. It meant if you wanted to know the art at its deepest level and master its most potent techniques, you had to work very hard to find them, because what is taught is not always what it seems. Toguchi describes these simplified or watered-down techniques as modified movements of real fighting techniques, unquote. So what were those real fighting techniques, and how could they be found? This is the purpose of research amongst serious karate adherents. As Masayama stated, the key that truly unlocks the door to the deepest realms of martial mastery is sweat, the sweat of our own hard-earned experience. We apply the fundamental principles as taught by the masters to our own tireless training, and experience reveals all answers in time. Your Kanku gi patch looks intriguing from what I was able to observe as you reposition. Oh, yeah, that I don't know if I don't even know if it's the right way up, or whether when you look at it, it's just my dojo's patch. Cameron Quinn branch, International Karate Organisation, Kyokushin, Brisbane, Australia. That's how old it is. That's back when I had the dojo in Brisbane. Anyway. Kaisei is the isolation and detailed analysis of the techniques and movement within a kata. The deepest secrets are not found in superficial effort. Even as karate continues to grow throughout the world, what is taught widely is only the tip of the iceberg. Remember that until a certain point, most teachers will not reveal the keys that unlock their system to you. You must search for those keys yourself. Train with a skilled and trusted training partner in increasingly more realistic scenarios. And I have to add that I'm highly doubtful whether there are many people, no matter what rank, who really do, I'm talking about Kyokushin especially, who really do know the keys to those secret techniques. I certainly have only come across what I've come across. Sosai told me one secret technique, and I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but anyway, there was once we were doing an interview and he was asked, what is the secret of karate? And he made a very, obvious gesture. And he looked around and he said to me, maybe it's time I reveal the true secret of karate. So I went like that and I translated it in English, and all the microphones came forward and the cameras went on. They're all like this. And he leaned forward and he said, the secret is sweat. And hey, Us, Saria, good to see you, man. All the way from Poland. Us, the only secret is sweat. And he said, everything is revealed in the sweat of your own hard training. And they were kind of like a little bit disappointed. But he said to me later, there are secret techniques that aren't taught to the general public. And often an instructor will watch the students to see if they've discovered those techniques themselves in their own training. And he taught me only one. He said, and we were talking in his room later on, and then he asked me what I was doing with my training, and then I told him that I was working on Kanku, and then he taught me one of those secret techniques. So, well, there you go. That's true. And the ecstasy of sweat, that's a good phrase. I've got some tales I can tell you about that too. And if anyone doubts that deep concentration and hard training is less than a drug high, I can tell you now it's not. Not that I've ever done drugs, but I can't imagine that a drug high could be any better than what I experienced a few times. Anyway, kaisei is the isolation and detailed analysis of the techniques of movement within a kata. The deepest secrets are not found in superficial effort. Even as karate continues to grow throughout the world, what is taught widely is only the tip of the iceberg. I read that paragraph, didn't I? Let us now look in more detail at the keys of kaisei no gendi. For this, I primarily refer to Toguchi's aforementioned text. Toguchi explained that Miyagi Chojun taught kaisei no gendi based on three main principles, or shuyo samgensoku. Again, I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of Japanese terminology. You don't need to worry about any of it, but it's all in the book if you're interested. and a number of supplementary guidelines, Hosoku Joko. These are as follows, with a brief commentary. Shuyo San Gensoku, 3 primary principles. So I've given the principles and I've given a paragraph of my own explanation of those principles, just to help along. 1, don't be deceived by the Embusen rule. All kata follow an Embusen, specific performance lines. These lines are simply designed to assist in training. They enclose the kata within a given space and take into account the angles of defense and attack. They are not strict rules that must be adhered to in kaisei training, and simply provide a layout that the techniques of the kata may be performed on. Kaisei take the kata as a framework, and just as in a real confrontation, there are no enforced limitations. The change in direction and angle represents the change in our response to the attacks we are faced with. All techniques in kata are at 90 degrees or 45 degrees, simply because the human body is round. 2, techniques executed while advancing imply attacking techniques. Those executed while retreating imply defensive or blocking techniques. This is a simple yet profound insight, just as we should not be deceived by the Embusen, nor should we be deceived by the technique being used. A block is a lock, is a blow, is a throw. By applying this principle to the thought process in kata training, we can see that, for example, when we step forward with a block, that block is more than a defensive motion and instead represents an attack. This also encourages us to think twice about the notion that is often presented, that all kata begin defensively. Whilst the first technique of a kata may be a block, by stepping forward in the direction of the opponent, we are actually taking the initiative and preemptively attacking. I think I mentioned somewhere else too that it could be a preemptive attack, or it could also be a simultaneous defense and attack. Yeah, Damien, I knew someone would ask. I'll tell you another day. And the whole concept of techniques disguising techniques. When he explained that one to me, it just blew my mind how simple it was, but it's definitely not something that that many people would discover without deep training and research. That's for sure. I got my head down because I'm thinking deeply. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's no longer a well. It's exactly. I mean, I know Mike's having a bit of a joke there, but it's true. And they really, and all my research, I'd spent months trying to research this kaisei Nigendi, and it's really difficult to find anything in Japanese. It really is, because everything says describe kaisei Nigendi as an oral tradition. And everywhere I went, I'd run into walls of oral tradition. And in other words, they're going, well, you have, if you're not part of the family, we're not going to share it with you right now. There you go. 3. So the second one, let me read that again because I got off track. Techniques executed while advancing imply attacking techniques. Those executed while retreating imply defensive or blocking techniques. 3. There is only one enemy, and she is in front of you. Even a little consideration highlights how unrealistic it is to imagine a kata represents defending against a number of attackers approaching from a number of different directions in a strict order. Just as in kumite, we gain advantage by changing angles against a single opponent before us, so too in kata, we should see the different angles of the embusen as our angle change in relation to the opponent before us. Hosoku Joko, in other words, the supplementary guidelines. And I've got a quote here from Miyagi Chojun. This is my own translation of it too, because I couldn't find it in English. The spirit and strength of a movement should conform with the objective of the technique, in accord with the principles of unraveling and retying the knots hidden within. So I love that. The spirit and strength of a movement means the mind and the physical. The strength of a movement should conform with the objective of the technique. What is the technique? Is it an attack or is it a defense? Are we trying to absolutely smash the guy, or are we just trying to control them? And the movement you choose in your research should conform with that objective. I love that. Our training is approached in two ways. A, en-eki ho, which literally means the deductive principle. So that's deductive. We look at us, and I try to explain that because applying the concept of deductive and inductive principles to kata training can be a little bit confusing. So I've given an explanation. So the first one, en-eki ho, deductive. We look at a specific kata technique in relation to the kaisei principles and guidelines and draw a logical conclusion that is realistic. For example, the kata sees us stepping to the left with Jodan Uke. So I guess here, as in the first step of Geksai Dai, yeah, I even wrote it. A step forward according to the second kaisei principle says the technique is a preemptive strike or a simultaneous. So we may conclude that the movement is, for example, a forearm jolt or elbow strike into the chest or face of the opponent. In other words, the technique selected conforms to the situation in the kata. You may recall a couple of weeks ago, I actually was doing that too in training. The second one, the second approach is kino-ho, or inductive. We look not so much at the actual technique, but at the scenario presented in the kata, the angle, range, and conditions, and apply a realistic technique that suits. In this case, the situation suggests the technique. So in the first one, the technique selected conforms to the situation. In the second one, the situation suggests the technique, and the technique can vary as a result. No matter which of these two we use, the outcome must be realistic against a non-compliant opponent. This vital consideration is the whole key to kaisei and presents the single most important difference between standard bunkai training and applying the principles of kaisei. So that's really important too, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to add it in the book, because bunkai, relatively speaking, bunkai is fairly recent in a lot of people's heads. I mean, there are still people around who just do the kata and know the movement of the kata, but they don't take it any further than that. But bunkai actually is really, really important if you take it deeper and deeper. So bunkai may be, for example, when I turn left in Taikyoku number 1, I'm turning left at the downward block, stepping forward with a punch. So I'm blocking a kick, I'm stepping through with a punch. That is acceptable as a bunkai. But when you look at it from a kaisei viewpoint, you're not actually turning to the left to block someone. You're not actually starting here and someone is there and you're turning to block their technique, and then I'm stepping through to finish the son of a gun. Kaisei will tell you we're using that movement as a scenario against someone who is encroaching upon us from the front. So now it may be that because we're stepping forward, rule number 2, stepping forward is an attack, even though we're stepping forward with a block. Well, that block, now we transfer it. We think, okay, what can I do with this block against the person coming in? So it may be that as I step off to the side, I'm hitting their knee, tripping them with my leg, taking them down and finish them. Or the second scenario may be that instead of just a block or punch, the second scenario, the inductive scenario, is I'm presented with a situation and I can free up without being too burdened by locking myself into the block and the punch. So it may be that I simply use that as a step, an indicator of what I can do next. So now the attack comes. It may be I go like this and then finish. Another example may be pin and 2. Pin and 2, we go from here, 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, okay? So we say, well, I'm stepping forward, and it's a block. Okay, but I'm stepping forward, so it's an attack. A bunkai may simply be someone is attacking, I'm blocking, I'm hitting, and I'm hitting, or sweeping, or whatever. But kaisei will say, okay, now the scenario is I'm stepping forward, so therefore it's an attack. The attacker is in front of me, and I'm turning left. Okay, so as the attack comes, I move off the side, and that technique there actually becomes oya yubi ipon ken. I can drive that into their temple. Okay, and then this technique, or it just may be that not only am I moving off here, this could be the block. Okay, so the attack is coming here. I can move here like this, hit the head, or I can move, like the punch is coming this way, you see. So I'm moving inside here, and that becomes a back fist. And then a tetsusei, in that small example, is that bunkai would be, I'm turning left because someone's attacking, I'm blocking, and then I'm countering with the punch, or depends which way you do it there. Kaisei will tell you, I'm greeted by a person attacking from the front, I'm moving left, and that is an attack. So now I'm simply presented with the scenario that allows me to broaden my thinking into a block is a lock, is a blow, is a throw. To assist, no matter which of these two. So let me just we go through those two again. So the deductive one, where we look at a specific kata technique in relation to the kaisei principle and draw a logical conclusion that is realistic. So that's where we go, okay, the first step is a gedambare gyakski, so oiski. So as the attack comes from the front, I'm moving off out of the dead zone, going left, and I'm using that gedambare, and it could be a hit to the back of the knee, it could be a hit to the groin, it could be a bunch of things, and then I'm punching. That's the first one. The second one is we look not so much at the actual technique, but at the scenario presented. So the angle, range, and conditions. So now we simply think, all right, long range attack coming straight in at me, I'm turning left, I can do anything I want, you know. So that's the difference. So we apply a realistic technique that suits the situation, okay? No matter which of these two are used, the outcome must be realistic against a non-compliant opponent. This vital consideration is the whole key to kaisei and presents the single most important difference between standard bunkai training and applying the principle of kaisei. To assist in clarifying the three primary principles, Miyagi also provided a further 9 supplementary rules as follows. 1. Every movement in every kata has significance and can be used in a real fight. 2. A closed hand returning to chamber usually has something in it. We say that at the dojo too, and I've discussed a few of these things. I've gone into great depth into this in my second book, the Budo Blueprint, but in a little later I talk about it as well. So whenever you have your hand returning here, you see it as you're breaking someone's balance. And that is in conformance with the principle of connection, which I may have spoken about in the past, where if I want to break someone's balance, and I use this, the perfect example of this that I can think of is in Sanshin Kata. It's different. Ours is different to yours, Mike, because we have a turn in our Sanshin. But if we look at the Sanshin and we're at the point where we're at the turn, a lot of people will do this. they'll bring the hand out and go like this and then turn. Okay? So they'll start here, move across, and turn. But it only takes a very small, and I'm sure Daniel Langworthy, I may have even done this at one of the seminars. It's a very simple demonstration of the difference between connection and no connection. So I'm chambering. Maybe someone's grabbed me. And if I try to break out of that without having connection to my body, I have zero chance of releasing the grip. It's zero chance. It's that simple. Someone grabs me here and I'm not going to beat them with my arm. But if I think of the concept of connection, in other words, I'm not moving my hand independent of my body. My hand is part of my body, and now I'm moving my body like that. So I hope I didn't rip my stitches then. I took my stitches out Friday and I promptly tore the scar open on about an hour later. So I've got closures on at the moment. So I had to go a little slower. But this has zero effect. This has very profound effect on the turn. Step. See here? I'm not just using my hand now, I'm using my whole body. I call that the principle of connection. And in the dojo, we spend a lot of time, particularly with the little kids, showing them that they become a huge weight and strength difference. Paddy, it's good to see you, man. Lennox, hey, buddy. Thanks for coming, Lennox. Nice to see you. Parks are open. Yes, I hear you guys are slowly relaxing a little bit. We have this version of Sanchin too. This is Higao Nakanyo Sensei's version of the kata brought back from China. But done originally. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, they do this sort of thing, I believe. Oh, man, I think one of my bucket lists is get to Okinawa and do some training with some of those guys. I'd love it. But anyway, so you can see the difference there. A closed hand returning to chamber usually has something in it. 3, use the shortest distance to your opponent. 4, if you control an opponent's head, you control the opponent, which is just uncanny because that is one of the primary teaching principles of freestyle wrestling. Control the head and you control the body. Any grappling, control the head, you control the body. That's the first thing I teach the kids. Get off your back and control the head and you control the body. 5, there is no block. Block as in a block. There is no block. You've got to see it differently to that. 6, pay attention to the angles. An angle change is in relation to the opponent before you, not a turn to face another opponent. There you go. 7, touching your own body in a kata indicates touching your opponent. Creating a connection between your body and the opponent's is a key way to leverage your power, which is just what we were talking about, connection. 8, contour the body. In other words, strike hard to soft and soft to hard. And that's worthy of research too, because by contouring the body has contours. It has concaves and convexes. And usually convexes are hard and concaves are soft. So you have to think in terms of contouring the body. So you attack the concaves or you attack the convexes. It just depends what you choose to attack them with. 9, there is no pause. Don't be confused by the timing in a kata's embu sen. Okay, so sometimes in a kata, there'll be a pause. Okay, and then you'll move on. No, it doesn't work like that. It's bang, 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 like a machine gun. If you have applied yourself to a serious effort in kata training, working with a trusted training partner in increasingly non-compliant applications, you may definitely find correspondence between these guidelines and the conclusions you have drawn based upon your own experience. I hope so. Ultimately, that is all that counts. You cannot apply another's conclusions to your own karate, even though their experience may assist you in finding your own answers. As Sosai repeatedly reminded his students, all answers shall be revealed through the sweat of hard training. Only your own conclusions count. Okay, so that's that section on kaisei no gendi, and I'm really excited because I have a feeling it's the first time it's being presented to a predominantly Kyokushin audience. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was really interesting. I'm going to, any comments, by all means, put them there, because we have Mike here, and Mike is an eighth dan. You're an eighth dan, I believe, Mike, in Okinawan Goju. So he can tell you an awful lot more about kaisei no gendi than I can. And I'm sure it's a great opportunity to discuss anything whilst we're here as a group. Now, I have another section which I'm going to read, and this is much, much shorter, but it's really valuable. And this is what I call the 4-step kata training. As a suggestion, here is a hierarchy of learning that I use in my own dojo. And I've got a footnote that for a more in-depth explanation, refer to Budo Blueprint. Little bit of a sales pitch there, I guess. Consider this approach in your own training. There is no time restraint or expectation for each step. 1, dosa, or movement. Learn the movements of the kata, including the footwork, ki-eyes, balance, especially on the turns, timing, and points of power stress. That is, where it is slow and tense or fast and explosive. 2, shin, gi, tai. Understand and drill the correct and effective use of the techniques. Punch the punch, block the block. Apply power, tension, and speed as appropriate in accord with Sosai's 3 major principles of kata training. When you have a good level of mastery, apply mental volition to your technique. 3, bunkai. Next, break down the kata in 1 and 2 technique flows and experiment with a wider range of possibilities based on sound principles of movement. And now we have those sound principles of movement because in the principles that are provided by Miyagi Chojun in Kaisei no Gendi, we can apply that to our bunkai. Research. Why is the technique done that way? How does angle and distance leverage effectiveness? How can the turns be made a part of the technique rather than merely turning to do the next technique in another direction? What does the hikite do, the retracting hand? Test, tweak, retest. So in relation to that, for example, some some groups of Kyokushin, when they do Taikyoku Ich, they do this. They'll start here. The first technique is there. Second technique is there. Now, what other groups do is, so you see the difference. The first one is here. The second one is here. What's the point? What's the difference? And I remember having some interesting discussions. That's a polite way of saying arguments. What's Al? Down for 50. Good to see you. So I've had interesting discussions with people who I felt were rather flaunting in their arrogance and with their knowledge of kata, and it turns out they knew very little. That way and then that, or that way and then that, one is right, one is wrong. Well, no. Both are right. So in the third step that we teach at the dojo is, why is we ask, research, why is the technique done that way? You never say a technique is wrong. You always say, well, there must be a reason why they chose to do it that way. It turns out, unfortunately, in some of the Mac dojos of the world, the technique is just plain wrong because they have no clear understanding or explanation of why they do it that way. Yeah, well, it can depend on the application, but it can also depend not on the application alone, but also on the, actually, that word application is tricky, on the way it is done, not just why it is done, but the way it is done. So, for example, the difference between this and this, one is speed, So if I'm here and I just want to hit and then hit like that, that's what you're doing, the block, block. The other is dealing with an encroaching opponent, and I've actually used this. It was one of my favorite, let me rephrase that. If I was to ever have had a street fight, it probably would have been one of my favorite techniques. I would actually drop, drive, and then step through and hit. And that hand was a feeler. It could be dark. They could have thrown a drink in my face. But what I've done is by coming here, now I have proprioceptive feedback. I know exactly where everything is. So as I drive through, I can feel what I'm doing. There, like that. The first one, there is none of that. It's just there, it's fast. The second one, where there is the raising hand, boom, bang. What you can do is use that hand to add to the effectiveness of what you're doing. But they're very different techniques. Also, yeah, there you go, when you came around that time. Well, so so you're right, Al. It depends on the application of the technique. When I read that, I thought you meant the application in terms of which technique you're using. But no, it depends on how you're using that technique. Yeah, you're right. And Al and I have discussed this numerous times. Al trains with us down at the dojo. So, research. Why is the technique done that way? How does angle and distance leverage effectiveness? And that's true. You've got certain techniques are completely useless here, and they completely kill at this angle. When I say kill, they're completely effective at that angle. We know that too, because when we work on the wrist turns, certain techniques and wrist locks are completely useless one angle and completely effective at another. The fourth step, oyo. Take the techniques you have worked on in the bunkai and test them with a trusted partner in gradually more realistic scenarios. Use the principles of kaisei training as described above. Progress from compliance to non-compliance. Begin from a non-aggressive defensive stance or from compromised positions such as being held in various control positions, lying down or sitting down on a chair or on the floor. So they're the four steps. As mentioned at the beginning of this section, strictly speaking, bunkai refers to the disassembly and analysis of kata, breaking down the kata into sections, isolating smaller techniques, then focusing smaller technique flows, then focusing on a particular movement or technique and analyzing it. Expanding techniques in a way that shows how to apply them in actual situations is more referred to in Japanese as oyo. We'll stick with using the term bunkai though, so everyone is on the same page. Apply the principles of kaisei training and seek common concepts throughout all of the kata. Let's look at an example. When the hands come together in a kata, what does it mean? You could be breaking the opponent's balance by using both hands to grab an arm or a leg and push, pull, or turn him. So, Pinan, 5, there, hands are together. People say these X blocks don't work, and if you do that, well, I tend to agree, you're not going to get far. But if you see it in terms of my hands coming together, I'm grabbing his wrist, I'm controlling him, because remember the principle of Miyagi Chojun, when your hand turns to chamber, returns to chamber, you have something in it. So bang, I've come up, I've got their top of their wrist, I've got their elbow, and I'm breaking their balance as I return my hand to chamber. You could be breaking the opponent's balance by using both hands to grab an arm or leg and pull, push, or turn him. So now, every time you do a kata, when the hands come together, you can picture the movement being used to control the opponent and break his balance. With the new concept in mind, return to the flow of techniques and you have a strong bunkai application that makes sense. If, for example, the hands come together followed by a turn, visualize breaking his balance and taking him to the ground. In this way, continue your research into practical applications of all kata techniques. The concept of seme, semeru, yeah? Damien, seme, break and take the center line before striking. Good, yeah, semeru means to keep encroaching in that. Yes, nice. This is exactly why karate takes a lifetime if we want to approach mastery in Okinawa. It's often said that one lifetime is not enough. Well, I tend to agree. I met this amazing gentleman. His name slips me. But he would be what I consider to be the greatest swordsman living in Japan today. They have an annual competition in Japan for sword makers. Not when I say swordsman, I meant swordsmith. He's the greatest living swordsmith in Japan today. And his name's Ono Sensei. Now, they have an annual competition, and in the end, they just said there's no point in him competing in it anymore because if he competed, it was a no-brainer that he'd win because the swords that he produces are, talking to experts, they say that they're the greatest swords for the last 2 or 3 centuries. And you can show someone, and I wanted to buy one of his swords. They were like, at the time, a cheap one was about $40,000. But it's got to the point now where you can't get them anymore because he has such a backlog and the price has just gone up and up and up. They're like $250,000 now. And he makes one sword a year, basically. Now, you can show his sword to someone who knows swords and they'll look at that and they'll go, yep, that's a 17th century Bizen blade. And if you say to them, no, actually, it's only 20 years old, they go, oh, in that case, it's Ono Sensei's, because no one else in the last 400 years can make a sword like him. Now, getting back to my point here, Mike says that it takes a lifetime. And when I saw that sword, I actually got to see a sword and hold it, and it was just breathtaking. You cannot believe a sword can be so perfectly, beautifully made. You think of how beautiful samurai swords are, then his samurai swords are the greatest swords made in the last 400 years. That's how incredible they are. And I said to him that someone who was there said it must take a lifetime to be able to do that. And I said, actually, no, this would take 7 lifetimes. You're not going to be able to master anything in a single lifetime. This is why someone like Mozart picks up a violin at 4.5 or whatever, and for the first time he plays it, 2.5, I think it was, played almost perfectly by ear a concerto that he'd heard, you know. So it takes lifetimes, and like Mike said, in Okinawa, one lifetime is not enough. Definitely, it is not enough. I'm thinking that now, and that every key that opens another door opens another lifetime of research. It's just like, gosh, what are we going to do? You know, there's no end to it. Okay, so that's my reading for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope by doing a little bit of physical explanation, it makes a little sense to you. But I think this whole section is going on kata in the book. I hope that it really serves. Obviously, you don't want to write a book where no one reads it, but I also hope that it really makes a difference in people's training life. It's very interesting, and Mike Clark, your comments are always welcome. You've made some good comments there today, of course, but being a very highly graded and experienced leader in Okinawan Goju, you know, I defer to your comments here. Very interesting. I'm wondering, Mike, have you ever trained with people like Toguchi Sensei? I know that you've trained with Nagamine Sensei, I believe. Thanks, Marco and Daniel. Good on you. Us, Damien. thanks for your contribution too. But I don't know, Mike Clark, have you ever trained with Toguchi Sensei? Be interested to know that. Awesome reading about Kata, Xian Cameron. Thank you. Your interview with Mike Ninomiya is already up on YouTube. Oh, good. Yeah, I had a look at it, actually. It wasn't too bad. Didn't get to say much because it was pretty short. And I talked 13 to the dozen. Frederick, thanks again. Thank you, Frederick. Clarence from South Africa. Good to see you. Have a fantastic week, everyone. Indeed. Thanks. Push ups done. You're the man, Al. Good on you. Rob, thanks for that. Yes. Yes, he passed away. Okay, yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd check. Torbjörn, thank you. I got to talk to you at some stage, Torbjörn, too. I'll contact you another way, but I need to run something by you and get your advice. Rochelle, good on you. I sent a message to Hombu, Rochelle, to inquire about your application, so I'll let you know soon. But I know they're pretty overwhelmed because they're getting so many, surprisingly, a lot of applications. The organisation, I think people are finding somewhere that they can relate to soul size karate to. Harry, good on you. Thanks, man. Mike Lorden, good to see you, man. Thank you for staying all the way through, Mike. Saria, Sven, Rochelle, thank you. Yeah, Paul, yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you. And like I said, I won't be here Friday. I'll be sitting down with the graphic designer. If I get a chance, I'll come online and do a little bit of something. But I'll be in Cairns, North Queensland. So for all you overseas people, it's nice. Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. See you soon.